on the game system, just turning it on.
Yeah, we'll focus on the game system. So this is the Game Boy
SP.
SP.
To me, this is the peak of Game Boy and handheld gaming performance. I don't know if you could hear the music, but there's different things. Backlight, no backlight. You see that?
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that stuff. It allowed me to play it a lot more, and I think that's one of the reasons I completed so many of the games, because I could actually see what the hell I was doing.
And that one, I mean, you can flip it shut, so that you can really keep that in your pocket. Plus, it kind of protects the buttons.
Yeah.
Because it protects the. I was always worried about that. I avoided carrying this thing in my pocket because I didn't want to wear out the buttons. See, with that thing, you don't even have to worry about that. It's very well designed.
And it's a lithium battery, so you could recharge it. I don't have the reoccurring cost of wasted batteries.
And you could just leave it plugged in if you had to.
Yeah, I was really conservative on using this thing and battery stuff. I could probably run this thing, like, not full-time, but for several hours a day for like 2 weeks and never have to, probably months. It felt like I've run this for a long time, and the light changes colors. And it's 14 years old probably, because I think I got it in 2003, 2004, somewhere around there. I paid about $100 for it at the time. My first gaming system was the Advance. That was the first one that I ever bought. I got it on sale.
And this one does have batteries in it, and I'll just turn it on for you really briefly here just to show you that it does still work. Let me see, where is the switch here?
Right there.
Oh. Okay, cool. Yeah. See, there it turns on, and it does work. And it does still work very nicely. The Game Boy Pocket here does not work, unfortunately, just because I wore it out. But this older Game Boy here that I got from a thrift store, it also does still work. Nintendo, in my experience, especially like classic Nintendo, they really built their shit to last.
They make really good quality products. I would say out of a lot of the electronic manufacturers, I would put them in the top 3 for caliber of hardware that they use and the quality of it.
Like the NES at this point is about the same age as me. It's like 32 years old now. The American version of the NES is like 32 years old, and it's actually more common to come across one that still works than one that doesn't. They're pretty well. They're so well built that here you have this 32-year-old piece of hardware that was used by children, and children,
beat the hell out of it.
Beat the hell out of things, and yet still there are a lot of them floating around that still work, and they're actually roughly, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember my last visit to a video game store, which was not too long ago, they cost about the same now as they did back in the day. They haven't actually gone, or at least not very much. They haven't really gone up in price. They're still right around $100 to buy an NES.
But they haven't depreciated either.
Yeah,
they're not like a $3 Game Boy.
Yeah, they haven't depreciated, but they also haven't become ridiculously expensive because there's still plenty of them floating around that still work even after all these years.
My guess is this would be fetching you a pretty penny. It'd be a lot more than $3 because a lot of retro gaming's kind of come back.
Well, yeah, like when I bought this, it was probably about 10 years ago that I bought it for that price, and that was back before the Game Boy was just an outdated. It was outdated, but it wasn't quite classic yet.
Yeah.
So, but now, because it's like 10 years later, we've gotten to the point, this thing's like 25, 30 years old. We've gotten to the point where it's not an outdated piece of shit anymore. It's a vintage, classic, antique. It is actually an antique, because it was made in like 1989. I mean, this is a collectible antique and no longer just an outdated piece of shit, because that much time has passed. That it's crossed that threshold.
What's interesting is, where does something become old junk and an outdated piece of shit?
Well,
and when does it actually become a collectible? How do we define that as a culture in society?
In the antiques industry, I believe it's 25 years. I think that after 25 years, something is technically an antique.
From an electronics thing, I think an antique from a really collectible thing would be like 100 years old.
Something can be a collectible and not be that old.
Yeah.
Like something can be only like from 5 years old and still be a collectible.
Yeah.
But in the antiques industry, 25 years old and older is antique.
So those are kind of cool. We can go back to some of these games though. This one, I like these are kind of variety packs. This has the Game of Life, Yahtzee, and Payday, all in one.
That's
And it
cool.
was-
3 in 1.
And so it was a good value. It was probably on sale when I got it, and I liked that one.
Those
so-
are all board games too, so it's the board game cartridge.
Yes. And then this is Pac-Man and a whole variety of Pac-Man games. They were
Is that
pretty
just
cool.
the 2D Pac-Man?
Or I think it's just 2D. I haven't played it in a while.
Okay.
This is a whole collection of Atari games. Atari was kind of a cool company. They really, I think that's where Steve Jobs worked at before he founded Apple.
Well,
And-
that's true. And Steve Bushnell started up Atari, who was also the guy who started Showbiz Pizza, which became Chuck E. Cheese's.
yeah. So a lot of cool stuff.
So
he's
he
done.
was kind of he was the pre Steve Jobs in a lot of ways. He was a very similar type of guy, this like cool bearded guy who was like kind of a hippie and like was a computer programmer, but he also had business sense. And so he was kind of like the Steve Jobs before there was a Steve Jobs. And he's still alive, I believe.
Yep.
He's, I think, somewhat retired at this point, but we have him to thank for Showbiz Pizza and Chuck E. Cheese. It kind of shows his good business sense because here he started up basically a kids arcade for his, where his games would get more play.
These are, this is kind of a cool one. This one I never really made it that far. I remember in there they'd be like, man down, man down, man down, because I had to like take out terrorists and like liberate people and stuff, and it was just not winnable. Like I took out everybody, and then even when I couldn't rescue the hostages. Like I don't know what command to actually press to rescue the hostages.
So that explains your PTSD.
I'm like, I killed all the bad guys, but I can't get them out of here.
Oh,
And they're
man.
just stuck, and it was just like...
Getting flashbacks from something that happened in a Gameboy game, dude.
Yeah. I'm like...
I couldn't save them. I wasn't good enough. I can't go back out there, man. I just can't.
Yeah, it'd be like a suicide mission. But, it was kind of an interesting one. It's rated teen as well. This other one is based on the movie.
Just like War. War is rated T for teen.
Wow.
Oh, we're terrible people.
Wow, like
we're
18.
fucking awful, evil people. We're going to hell.
Wow.
But anyway.
So...
Okay, so.
This is a movie, Sum of All Fears. This is the Game Boy game equivalency. You can see that it's the 90th anniversary of Paramount Pictures, which I think was,
Oh, wow.
that was probably 2004. I'm going to see if I can see a copyright date. Can't really see one on here, but I'm guessing probably 4 or 5, somewhere around there, when I got this.
Yeah.
I don't remember the game. I think it kind of sucked, but it just was a cool cartridge, so I kept it. And I'll focus on my Mario Club. These are my main Mario games. Super Smash Mario Advance, and then Mario Kart, like the Game Boy.
Mario Kart to this day has a huge following.
Oh, yeah.
People, a lot of potheads like it. No, and it is true. I'm only kind of half joking about that. I mean, it does seem to have this disproportionately large pothead audience.
If you're tripping balls, man, and you're driving as Mario, and you're going around in a circle, it's like interactive NASCAR with cool shit.
I do have to give the Nintendo 64 credit. I to this day, I remember going to Best Buy or Walmart and playing Nintendo 64 games when they were new on like just the TV they had there as just a display TV, and just being blown away by the fact that you're playing a game that's like actually three-dimensional.
Yeah.
I mean, back at that time, it felt so futuristic, and even to this day, Nintendo 64 games, they hold up pretty well. I mean,
Yeah.
they've aged pretty well. You play an N64 game now, and it doesn't really look all that outdated. It really kind of paved the way for modern gaming in a lot of ways. That and the Sega Genesis, I believe. But anyway,
So that was kind of that thing, and I think you're right, because the GameCube's okay. I've never really owned any Nintendo console games. I've just had the Game Boy, and I never really went to the DS or anything. I stopped at the Game Boy. They made one version after this. This was kind of the end of the Game Boy era, and this is actually considered one of the most popular designs.
and it is a very good design. I mean, you can tell that's built very well. It's very very.
I love it. I think it's just awesome. It's very portable. It's very utilitarian, and it's very well protected because it's like, nothing major is going to get busted on it. The buttons aren't going to pop off. Everything's really pretty good.
Looks very solid. Yeah.
So I've liked that quite a bit. But I was never a DS fan. Two screens piss me off. If you know something about me, I'm very efficient, and I like utilitarian principles and values in design and in a lot of things. I don't want the two-screen bullshit. I'm not going to get like double vision because you're having two screens and I got to touch here and tap here and do this stuff and all this other bullshit. I just want to focus on one screen and one thing, hit my A button, hit my B button, and accomplish my goal. I don't want all this other fancy shit that these DSs started doing, and yeah, so I'm not going to go on my high horse about that, but just to let you know, I'm not a huge fan of what replaced the Game Boy. I feel like the Game Boy was the peak.
I feel like the Game Boy really was the pinnacle in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be partly just kind of nostalgic bias, but I really do kind of feel that way. I mean, Game Boy games, whether you're talking about kind of this generation of Game Boy games or this generation, they're just very solid, very tight, well-designed games. The actual Game Boy itself, the hardware and everything is just really well designed. And you don't even have to take our word for it. Just the fact that most of this shit still works. The games themselves and the systems. I mean, the fact that here it is 20, 30 years later and this shit still works. I mean, that kind of speaks for itself.
We should tweet that to Nintendo. Most of this shit still works at Nintendo #GameBoy.
Yeah.
Because that is kind of a real unique brand thing. Most electronics, like we talked earlier, you're lucky if your cell phone's working 3 or 4 years after you own the thing.
This was in the era, like the 80s and 90s, when Japan really wanted to be known for kicking ass in electronics. Mm-hmm. They wanted to build everything as good as they could possibly build it. They wanted everything to just be really solid and well designed and long lasting. And to a certain extent, they're still kind of that way, especially with cars. The Toyota and the Honda, still very solid cars. You buy one of those. I believe the Deviant historian calls them silver turds.
Yeah, silver turd mobiles.
You buy one of those, but hey, that thing's gonna be reliable for like a decade.
What do they call them? Japanese shit boxes in a movie.
The gambler.
Yeah,
that really badass scene.
Get your fuck you money. He's never have to answer to anybody.
John Goodman's really badass scene in that movie. Probably one of my favorite speeches in cinema.
Yeah.
Is that 5-minute scene that he has where he's basically calling Mark Wahlberg an idiot.
Yeah. So you're blowing all this money. You could be all set for life, have everything paid for. Get a Japanese shit box. That run it into the ground,
I love John Goodman.
Yeah, I do too. Like that, and what's that movie? The
Big Lebowski.
And yeah, just a lot of stuff he's in. He's a great actor. He's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So, speaking of great stuff, I'll go actually to this one. I want you to look at this really close, really personal.
Ooh, Cruising Velocity.
That meant a lot to you growing up. It meant a lot to me. Like the arcade game version of this. This is the Game Boy Advance version of it. So I played that periodically.
I'd be interested in maybe playing this a little bit at some point.
I'll show you. We could show it on that in a minute. But that's why I wanted to highlight that particular game, because it meant a lot to me growing up. It was like the preeminent arcade driving game. It was really well done, and it was just cool racing. You got like a Hummer, shitty taxi, Dune Bug, a whole variety of vehicles at your disposal that you could utilize in 3D.
Yeah, we brought up Chuck E. Cheese earlier. I used to go to Chuck E. Cheese a lot as a kid in the 90s and early aughts, and it was just something that my family did. And if you follow my channel, you probably you can see on my channel that my the footage I took of the Chuck E. Cheese's in here in CR the day that it closed is my highest viewed video. It's
over 11,000, right?
Almost 12,000 at this point views. So I'm pretty proud of that I had the foresight to go in there the day that it closed and really get a really good 20-minute sort of mini documentary of the whole place, so that we the 90s kids and 80s kids who loved that place so much can still in some way visit it. Maybe even someday somebody will make like a virtual reality of it based on my video. But anyway, yeah, I used to play Cruisin' World a lot, which is an N64 game, and that was a game that they had at Chuck E. Cheese's. It was an arcade game with the steering wheel, and I actually credit that game for saving my life, because a few years ago on the way to Ames, I think it was on Highway 30, I very nearly got into a fatal car accident. It was mostly my own fault, but I actually credit the driving skills and the crash avoidance skills that I learned in that game with potentially saving my life, because when I avoided what would have been almost definitely a fatal accident very effectively, and I'm almost positive that the reason that I was able to avoid it was because of the muscle memory, and because if you ever play those games, you know that crashes are a very typical thing in those games. Like crashing, like you crash way more times in those games than you could ever realistically survive. But just so you have to, if you're going to be good at that game, you have to really get good at avoiding those crashes. And I really feel like it's very likely that that game at least had a hand in saving my life.
Okay, I'm going to go to Midnight Club. I don't know if you've heard of it. They had it for PlayStation 2 and all that. I don't really remember if it was 2D or 3D. I don't remember a lot about it. I just know it was cool. But I thought I'd throw that one in. This one here is a really important game. This is a 3D version of Driver. I had the original Driver for Game Boy. I don't know where it went now, but Driver really created, the original Driver in particular, the open world concept that a lot of other games, Grand Theft Auto and a bunch of other driving car games, really kind of emulated. Because you had the race stuff, like your whatever Racing USA game we were just talking about. I forgot the name of it already.
Cruisin' World.
Yeah, that one. You had that, but that was really fixed in a finite circle jerk of driving around and racing and doing that. This, the Driver series, just let you drive a car. You could drive around town. You could do whatever and that. And it was just cool. Driver 2 on PlayStation and on this one, it was the first 3D variation of that type of driving game. And Mario Kart's the same way as those other ones. They're all racing games. They all have a finite starting point, a finite ending point.
Yes.
They don't really allow you to just free range and run over pedestrians or go on rampages.
They're actually, with Cruisin' World, the store bought version, you actually could run over like if you were in Africa, because this was you could actually run over a rhino and the thing would bust apart into like chunks of meat. The arcade version of that, they actually you could program it to basically be like either G-rated or PG-rated or PG-13 rated. There were a couple of times when they actually reset the game where they forgot to put in those kind of child-safe settings, and you could actually like do kind of the raunchier shit like that. And then there was also like a girl in a bikini at the finish line, like a bunch of girls in bikinis, and there was an option to edit that out, and the people at Chuck E. Cheese's decided to edit unfortunately to edit that out. So there were things to make it more kind of child friendly. You could have those options.
We're doing it for the children. We're doing it for the children.
We're doing it for the children.
Yeah.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
All that, it's just ridiculous. So even though you're like this horny, probably teenager, and you want to see like a digital bikini babe to congratulate you on finishing the race, what do you get? You just get like just a you finished sign. That's it.
Yeah,
Good job.
Just because it's. Just because it's not on the screen doesn't mean it isn't in your head.
Oh.
Well, and then the ending thing, if you beat Cruisin' World, which I did a lot, I actually was able to cruise the world on just a couple of tokens. I was good enough that I could get first place almost every time.
Wow.
And at the end, there was this thing where you got into a rocket, like a space shuttle, and you landed on the moon, and there was a hot tub party on the moon with Bill Clinton and a couple of women in bikinis.
Even in the PG one.
Even in the PG
Wow,
one, yeah.
that's some hot stuff.
It was Bill Clinton with a couple of with women in bikinis. It might have been Hillary and Chelsea. I don't know. Maybe that was the edited version, and the unedited version was hit with him with
Hot
like
chicks.
Monica Lewinsky or something.
Yeah.
This was in the late '90s, so that was very topical at the time.
That's a really trippy ending. I was not aware of that ending. So, wow, that. Yes. So anyhow, Grand Theft Auto. I love the Grand Theft Auto series. Probably my favorite in it is actually Vice City.
Yep, all you damn second wave millennials were raised to not have any morals at all, steal people's shit. That's like a joke. On Reno 911, they're always riffing about how the kids have no morals because they were all raised by Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Well, I mean,
It's like, for all of you who are raised by Grand Theft Auto, we applaud after we see something.
Huh.
Yeah.
So this was okay. I really like the PlayStation 2 version of it, like the Grand Theft Auto 3 and Vice City and San Andreas and that. And I never really played them much beyond that. I actually downloaded those on my phones later. But this was just kind of cool. And this really, I liked how they provoked the First Amendment right. Because where does...
Yeah, and the Fifth Amendment probably.
The right
if you
to
got
remain
arrested, you could learn about your right to not incriminate yourself.
Well, in one of the games, I always like that they talk about it, and they have an attorney defend you, and he's like, "I never said he was innocent." It's one of the quotes that he had said. Even though you'd go on some psychotic rampage with a flamethrower and an AR-15, and it really allowed you to channel your aggression and your anger in healthy, manageable ways, where you gunned down digital people and there were no consequences for your actions. Totally helps you with the real world. But also, I think a lot of the burden should fall really on the parents. Like we were talking about the Chuck E. Cheese and just the pussifying of the game, where they just had to make it so it's all kiddie friendly and stuff.
Yeah.
Where if you were a private citizen and you, even as a child, did your parents allow you to play these games? Because my mother always, whatever I wanted, I could always usually get. They were always pretty empowering with opportunities and access to certain things. This other kid in the neighborhood, and several of them, their parents wouldn't let them have Grand Theft Auto. Evidently, you can't pick up a hooker and then gun them down and then run over people with and do drive-bys. They don't want a 12-year-old doing that. They think it's going to mess them up developmentally or cause emotional and psychological issues. And those issues were already there. This was just a way to express that.
Well, I remember when the Columbine shooting happened. Video games were on the chopping block for things to blame, along with South Park and other shit. And in reality, it was a couple of alienated kids who didn't have a lot of friends, and one of them was a sociopath, and he kind of got the other one to go along with his psychotic fantasy, and it really didn't have anything to do with any of that other shit. It was just
two crazy assholes.
Basically, just shit happens.
Yeah, but I think you always want an answer. You want an easy scapegoat. People are always looking to scapegoat somebody, and the video game system's made it that way because a lot of old people, they never played video games.
Yeah,
they had their 3 TV channels, and that's it.
I'll never forget. It was actually kind of moving in a way. When I was working at Half Price Books, there was an old guy, and he bought video games. He was probably in his 70s, and you could tell he wasn't healthy.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to do much physically. He had health problems. There was actually, I think maybe it could have been his daughter, or maybe a younger female relative, kind of helping him around. But he bought those games, and I was at the register one time when he bought those games, and you could tell he was so happy, to have those games, and kind of, it's kind of moving in a way, because number one, you don't see an old guy playing video games very often, especially modern ones, because these were modern games. These were PlayStation 2 games at the time, which at the time was very modern, state of the art, and it was just cool to see him, and you could tell, because like I said, he wasn't able to do much physically. He was really in a good mood to be buying these games, and you could tell he was really looking forward to playing them. And it was really kind of a cool thing.
So
it was kind of uncommon, though. I mean, you didn't see that very much. And even to this day, I would say that people kind of over the age of 50 are not all that into playing video games.
I'd say over the age of 40.
Yeah.
30 to 40. I mean, you'd really see your peak in your teen years to your mid-20s, and then I think you kind of see a drop-off.
Yeah. And, I actually, I'll show you this here. I forgot to show this. This is actually the instruction booklet. I used to have the one for Donkey Kong Land 2 too, and maybe I do somewhere, but this is the intact booklet for Super Mario Land 2. And you would get one of these whenever you bought a new game. If you bought it new, you would get an instruction booklet, and these were very helpful. And there was a magazine. This was before my time, but there was a magazine called Nintendo Power, and you kind of had to have a subscription to that magazine because it was very helpful if you wanted to really learn. See, there's Wario. He's the bad guy in Super Mario Land 2. I think this was the introduction to Wario. And then see, you got the 6 golden coins. It shows you all the bad guys you're going to encounter, everything to avoid. They really wanted kids to enjoy these games. You can tell. I mean, they really did everything they could to show you how to play the game. They gave you lots of hints on how to play.
To set you up for success.
They really wanted to set you up for success. I have to say, Nintendo. I think Nintendo is an old company,
1890s, I think, something like that.
A very old company, and they were originally they sold card games.
Yep,
playing cards, and like Japanese games, and so they really have a long tradition of quality and entertainment, and to this day, I would say they kind of live up to that. I think that even today, the games that they make are fairly solid, even though I don't really get into the modern games so much. But you see here, you can see all the characters, like the mushrooms and the mushroom character, the turtles, and the stinger, the wasp stinger guys. And
they always kind of had a code, even before there was the gaming system code. They would not do stuff that was violent. Their games were never violent.
Well, and that's another thing I kind of appreciate about Nintendo is I'm not really into the violent stuff so much. And I kind of like the fact that Nintendo's games are not terribly violent. They're kind of they're creative, and yet they're not violent. They're entertaining, and they're just they're very artistic, and they're just kind of the more. I kind of play video games to relax. Mm-hmm. I don't play them so much to get all stressed out and to get or even to take out my aggression. I play games to relax and explore kind of this cool imaginary world, or to basically to do a puzzle, as in the case of Tetris. Yeah. It's for me, it's kind of a meditative thing. So for me, Nintendo's a pretty good fit, and I've always been a fan of them.
I think that's where I've evolved to some extent too, because I really don't play Grand Theft Auto anymore, or a lot of those other games. I don't really play any of this much anymore.
I kind of wish life were more like a video game, I think that God should hire Nintendo to sort of reprogram the universe.
Ooh.
so that life isn't all tragic as fuck and everything, and discouraging and everything, because with these old video games, they were frustrating at times, but you were never despondent. You always wanted to come back and play more. They were challenging, but they were never depressing to play. They were always fun.
Except for when your battery died.
Except for when the battery and that was only because limitations of technology. But it would be really cool if life were more that way. If their life were challenging, but not so fucking tragic. It would be a great thing.
Or that you ran into obstacles that you just
that you can't overcome. It'd be great if you could always overcome your obstacles. That'd be a really
win-win
really cool
situation.